Hello, I'm Jason, and welcome to Horizon. Katie Walsh is out at the White House. Now, she's Reince Priebus, the current White House Chief of Staff, #2, and I guess the fall girl of the week. Now, reports are saying that she is most likely the source of the leaks at the White House. Now, I can see why Trump and all his insecurities have brought her out because he seems to think that the leaking is the problem, not the content of the leaks, which is what I think that most people think the problem is. Now, what you would hope he would understand is that if there's nothing to leak, then you don't have to worry about this issue. If you were having civil conversations, if you were not proposing stuff that was seems so outlandish that it would never get passed, so why would you discuss it? But you discuss it anyways, it gets leaked, and you act so shocked. It's just very surprising that it seems that elements of common sense and how stuff should work are just not being done. And that furthermore, he just kind of seems to insulate himself more and more people who reinforce his ideology, which is never a good thing. Now, it also probably means that Reince will soon also be on his way out. We can only hope that it just does not mean that Steve Bannon becomes White House Chief of Staff because Steve Bannon's really only good at setting fires. I don't think he's very good at getting stuff done. When you bring in the Freedom Caucus and just yell at them, that kind of just reflects that you don't really know who your supporters are. And you can honestly just say, too, that the Trump White House, something they've really been able to do well is talk a big game. Haven't been able to deliver anything, and they can't even really seem to get on the same page. And I think that's why Vox basically said in 6 points, which I'll attach to the video, that this is quickly turning into the most dysfunctional presidency because no one really seems to want to dive into the details to make such weird statements as no one knew healthcare was complicated. I think pretty much everyone knew that healthcare was complicated. I would imagine even Donald Trump knew healthcare was complicated, but somehow makes such a dumb statement that you really just have to question, what were you thinking? And that kind of keeps going into this healthcare debate anyways, that, he came out and tweeted today that, oh, we're going to declare war on Democrats in the House Freedom Caucus, which by taking out Democrats and taking out the House Freedom Caucus, you're basically aligning you with House and Senate GOP traditional conservatives who you railed against your entire campaign, who dislike you, and you're somehow thinking that they're going to save you. Now, that makes no sense. The Freedom Caucus, whether you like Trump or not, is pretty much the most Trumpian group in the House. So it doesn't make any sense why he would not first want their support and then also try to get support from Democrats who, may be more moderate or maybe in districts that Trump on hand over fist. But yet he seems to think that, oh, if I just now appeal to the Republican Party, they'll just come in behind me. And that's just not how it works. And that could honestly too have a lot to do with Reince being the chief of staff. So maybe if he gets rid of Reince as well soon, that they'll be able to find someone better. But looking at just some of the statements they make, it doesn't seem very likely. Now, with the House intelligence debacle, trying to somehow toss Devin Nunes as a lifeline is also dumb. At this point, just like Jeff Sessions recused himself, Devin Nunes just, needs to stop or needs to recuse himself because he's not helping anyone. You can't really restore faith that you've already lost. People assume that you're impartial. There's really no way to change that except, unfortunately, at this point, to step aside. And it looks like the responsibility is really going to land entirely on the Senate's Intelligence Committee. What's worrying about that, though, is that they seem to have a solution in mind without really trying to understand the evidence or process anything. You can make the same argument that's what happened with Hillary, is that you assume that Hillary was the cause of all the issues. And, oh, we just got to prove that she's, this malevolent force. Now, whether you agree with that or not, that seemed to be the direction that our congressional inquiries went. Will probably seem to be finding the same tone based off what, Senator Richard Byrd and his colleagues of the Senate Intelligence Committee said, is that, we aim to prove that the Russian intelligence and Russian government influenced this election. Instead of saying, we aim to find out what, if any, the Russian government had in this election, and also what involvement the current, past, and also Clinton campaign had with interactions with Russia. And I think this, being so defined on we have to prove Russian involvement in the election to explain why Trump is in the White House, it's just going to come off overtly partisan, and I think just get bogged down into he said, she said, which will essentially mean we spend a lot of money and have very little show for it, which happens a lot in Washington, but you would like with something that is so serious that is so divisive right now that we could come to some sort of resolution, but it looks unlikely. I mean, particularly now with this internet situation being off the table, which is very strange, and as someone who likes both tech and politics, to me makes very little sense. Why, on one hand, do you deride regulation and government as conservatives, and then you want to just allow ISPs, internet service providers, to sell all your browsing data? Now, you can say that it's difficult for them to operate, but probably that's a good thing that it's difficult. I don't think people really want their browsing history given out to an advertiser to be exploited. But then on the reverse is the people who are so just outlandishly against this statement. You have to ask, where is the support to have Google or Facebook change their business models? Because essentially they do the same thing. I mean, you see Google ads everywhere. They follow you from site A to site B to site C, and then on site D you're seeing ads from site A, and that's the same thing that they're just opening up to internet service providers. So it's hard to understand both sides. If you're anti-regulation, why are you really okay with your information going to advertisers? And if you think information going to advertisers is bad, why do you allow Silicon Valley tech companies to do it? Obviously, there is some pressure right now from investors to move away from ad-based revenue models for these big tech companies, but there doesn't really seem to be a government push that, hey, maybe people should have some right to privacy, which it would be nice to get back to eventually. Finally, looking abroad, the real major story of the day is that former South Korean President Park Geun-hye is now formally arrested for bribery. If you haven't been following this, long story short is President Park had what you could amount to a Rasputin relationship with a mystic who also has kind of had a relationship with her family in the past. And through this mystic, kind of had interactions with the Korean families or Toyboys who control a lot of Korean industry. And it came out and has pretty much brought down her entire government. Now, what's going to be really interesting with this is there's most likely a lot more seediness to this story than it's really kind of come out overly sanitized in the sense that, okay, she had this basically fortune teller in here who was giving her advice and she invested in, but there's probably a lot of darker stuff that's going on. So it'd be interesting to see that if the Korean judiciary system maintains what is really just a very regimented, by the books, sterilized environment, or because of the nature of this, because former President Park is who she is, that she did have this mystic involved in her circles, that instead takes more of a Korean drama course and then leaves everyone feeling very strange and no one knows what's going on. So we'll definitely follow that. We will definitely follow out what comes out of the Dysfunction House, which is really all I think that this has turned into. Both the Blue House in Korea and the White House, neither one of them are basically functioning properly right now. So keep it here on Horizon, and we'll keep you up to date. Thanks.